This is a 3-part series where I rank the Tintin books, just because if it wasn't, then it would be super long. In the first episode, I went over the worst of the Tintin books, in the second, I went over the mediocre Tintin books, and in the last one, this one, I'll go over the best of the best Tintin books. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, then go watch the first one, and if you want to, the second one. I'll try to put a link in the description. Wow, that makes me sound like a real YouTuber. Fancy, eh? Okay, so this is the point where we get to the really good Tintin books, the ones that are actually fun to read and offer interesting storylines and adventures. So let's do it. Number 9, The Black Island. This one is all about Scotland! Okay, but in all seriousness, Tintin is framed by Dr. Muller and evades him and the Thompson twins throughout Scotland. He stumbles upon Dr. Muller's secret counterfeiting operation on a mysterious island while fighting off a gorilla. He proves his innocence to the Thompson twins and arrests Dr. Muller. They all live happily ever after forever. The Black Island does a good job with everything, and the action is pretty good and the plot is more stable than most of the other books. I don't really know why, I just kinda like this book. I think the comedy is better than some of the other books too, and this is really just one Tintin book that I enjoy. Also, the way the Scottish accents are represented is just fantastic. I mean, okay, just listen to this. "Och, 'tis a terrible beast. There's themes in the nicht when the wind fry the sea. Ye can hear it. Wisht, d'ye hear? How'd yer wish, laddie, in spirit o' the beast that bides on the Black Island, aye the ruin o' Castle o' Cragdrui, the critter for devouring every man that saith bold to the gangs near the place." I couldn't even finish reading that. It's so amazing. Number 8, Tintin in Tibet. Tintin and Captain Haddock are on vacation in Tibet when they learn that Cheng, Tintin's friend from the Blue Lotus, has died in a plane crash nearby. What a great start. They are obviously bummed out, however when Tintin has a prophetic dream, they decide to go and climb up into the Himalayas to find him. There's a long hike, an avalanche, a monastery, and they eventually find Cheng, who is rescued by a Yeti. The Yeti runs away, and they all go home safely. Tintin in Tibet is a fine Tintin book with all the things that you would want from it. I think this book basically just shows how far the series has come from the first books, not only in art and style, but also in plot, characters, adventure, and not being extremely racist. Number 7, The Shooting Star. The Shooting Star is basically a long race where multiple parties want to claim a comet that fell in the ocean, and so everybody wants to get it and find out what properties it possesses. Turns out, it's magic! The meteor sinks beneath the ocean, and they all return home. The Shooting Star is a pretty interesting book and can be divided into 3 parts. Tintin on land, Tintin chasing the meteor, and Tintin on the meteor. Each of them is interesting in their own way. I personally like the magic that the meteor causes. It really just makes everything huge. And I think that sort of little extra addition beyond what most of the Tintin books are pushes this book from mediocre to good. Number 6, Flight 727 to Sydney. Tintin and the captain, and of course Snowy, are going to Sydney for a vacation when they meet Scoot, one of their friends, who happens to be a pilot at the airport, along with Mr. Carrierdas, a wealthy air tycoon who Scoot is working for. They all get on Mr. Carriers's private jet, and he happens to be going to Sydney too. But the plane is hijacked by his servant, who brings them to a tropical island in the middle of nowhere, where Rastapopoulos is waiting for them, and he wants to steal Mr. Carriers's money. They escape onto the island and into a series of caves beneath, where they find Mik Keryokotov, a strange man who tells them that he has been in contact with extraterrestrials, who plan on using that island as a landing spot. The aliens do, and hypnotize everyone to make them think it never happened. They all live happily ever after. Flight 727 to Sydney is one of the more out-there Tintin books, especially with the whole alien thing, but overall it's a pretty good book with a fine plot and action, one of the better books in this series. Number 5, The Secret of the Unicorn. So The Secret of the Unicorn goes along with its sequel, Red Rackham's Treasure, so I'll be ranking them together since they're very similar and basically have one plot. So, The Secret of the Unicorn. Tintin buys a model ship that lots of people seem to want, named the Unicorn, and finds a mysterious bit of parchment inside of it. Captain Haddock begins to tell the tale of his ancestor, Sir Francis Haddock, who is a sea captain for the British Empire who fights pirates. Back in the real world, the Thompson twins are on the case, and Tintin gets kidnapped and then manages to break free. And it is revealed that the ship and the parchment is only one of 3, and using all of them you can find buried treasure. Also in this one, there's a pickpocket, Nestor is evil, and Tintin breaks the fourth wall to self-promote Red Rackham's treasure. But I mean, come on, who would be gullible enough to buy a book just because a character in another book spoke a line about it? Number 4. Red Rackham's treasure. Cuthbert Calculus, that is his full name, introduces himself to Tintin, Haddock, and the twins. This is his first appearance in the books. And he tells them that they'll need a submarine to retrieve Red Rackham's treasure, and offers to sell them one. They refuse, but he sneaks one on board anyways. After some encounters with wildlife, they find and retrieve Red Rackham's treasure, only to realize that the real treasure was the friends they made along the way. No, I'm just kidding. They realize that the actual treasure was hidden inside of Marlin's Spike Hall, Captain Haddock's ancestral home. They find the treasure and all live happily ever after. These two books are pretty much the optimal Tintin books, and along with the following two books are by far my favorite. They're just so good, the comedy is golden, the characters are interesting, the plots are great, and the adventure is lovely to read about. So yeah, some of my favorites. Number 3. Destination Moon. So Destination Moon and its sequel, Explorers on the Moon, are pretty much two halves of the same story and are equally good in almost every way. So just for the sake of making sense, I'm going to talk about Destination Moon first, even though I think it's a little bit better than Explorers on the Moon and therefore would go later in the list. But yeah, just to make sense, I'll do this one first. Tintin and Captain Haddock follow a trail that leads to Professor Calculus in a foreign country, where they find him working on a rocket that will take them to the moon. They agree to go to space with Professor Calculus, and they prepare while evading attempts from a foreign power to halt their progress. The book ends on a cliffhanger with Tintin and the gang blasting off into space. Number 2. Explorers on the Moon. Picking up where Destination Moon left off, Explorers on the Moon starts with Tintin, Captain Haddock, the Thompson twins, who weren't actually supposed to be on the launch, Snowy Professor Calculus, and Mr. Wolf, who is a scientist. They set out about doing all of their scientific operations and explorations on the moon when they realized that there was also a spy who had stowed away on the ship. And so they must shorten their stay on the moon due to the lack of oxygen. And they barely return to Earth alive, but they all live happily ever after, forever. So just like the two books before it, Explorers on the Moon and Destination Moon are pretty much the optimal Tintin books, with intrigue, action, comedy, and an interesting premise, which puts these two books just right up there near the top of the list. And now, for my favorite Tintin book of all time, number 1, The Adventures of Tintin in the Land of the Soviets. Oh god, this one. It's really in a league of its own. I don't even know if I can compare it with the other books. It's just so different. In fact, yeah, you know what? Destination Moon, Explorers on the Moon, The Secret of the Unicorn, Red Rackham's Treasure, they all now receive the number 1 spot to share, and this one just goes in a category of its own somewhere off over the rainbow. This is now the square root of -1 number book, because I've given up caring at this point. Okay, so before I even begin to explain the non-existent plot of this one, I should tell you this. Remember in the beginning of the very first video, I said that the first one, this one, was basically anti-communism for kids? Well, that still holds true, and honestly, I don't think there is any better way to describe this book than anti-communism with hijinks in action. This book is so separate from all of the other books in terms of almost everything. Like, it's in black and white, the style is different. I mean, just look at that long Snowy. There aren't any other of the characters in this book, like Captain Haddock, the twins, or Bianca Castafiore. The plot is very similar to Tintin in America, where it's really just a series of action sequences that all happen at the same time in the same country. So, instead of explaining the plot, I'm going to keep a tally of the events of the story, and we'll just let it play out like this. And after all of that, Tintin is finally on his way home, where he will live happily ever after. For real this time. Forever. Aha! You thought I was done because I had gone through all of the Tintin books, excluding Tintin in the Congo, but we don't talk about that one. But you were wrong. You just got bamboozled. because there was another. In the unremarkable year that was 2011, a film was released. The Adventures of Tintin, The Secret of the Unicorn was a full-length animated movie based on the Tintin books. Actually, though, this is not the first animated project using the Tintin characters. There were quite a few TV shows, a musical, and a video game that all included the characters. But most of them were in French, and so didn't really reach a mainstream audience. Back to the movie. I was expecting this movie to not be all that great, and well, the movie actually was really good. I know, right? I was completely expecting this to be a terrible movie, but Steven Spielberg actually did a great job, and I think this is one of the best book-to-movie representations I've ever seen. But before I explain to you why I like this one so much, let me explain to you the plot. Tintin buys a model ship called the Unicorn and is surprised when somebody tries to steal it, so he travels to Marlinspike, where he accuses a man named Sakharin, who also wanted to buy it, of stealing a ship. However, he finds that Sakharin has his own model and so leaves. A man is then murdered at Tintin's doorstep and manages to tell him about the Caribou Jean, a ship in which Tintin is kidnapped and taken to, where he meets the permanently drunk Captain Haddock and learns that Sakharin is in control of the ship. The two of them escape in a rowboat and then a seaplane, but crash land in the desert, where Captain Haddock tells Tintin of his ancestor, Sir Francis Haddock, who fought the pirate Red Rackham and whose treasure is buried at the bottom of the sea. After a brief debacle in Begar with an amazing chase scene, they return home and capture Sakharin using cranes to sword fight. They realize that the treasure was in a room beneath Marlinspike the whole time, and so they buy the house, get the treasure, and all live happily ever after. For real this time. The Adventures of Tintin, the movie, as I said earlier, has one of the best book-to-movie translations I've ever seen, and as the story is composed almost entirely of pieces of the other Tintin books sewn together, but it doesn't come across as confused or with too many parts, and it blends together quite nicely to make a movie that, honestly, I think is better than the books that it come from. The animation is distinct, similar to the art style of Hergé, and there are some very well-done scenes. The chase scene in Begar, Haddock's hallucinations in the desert, and the way the opening credits are done to look like the Tintin books is amazing. There are loads of Easter eggs and references for fans to find, but the film still manages to make something new. So overall, if this movie was somehow a Tintin book, I think it would be my favorite. But I don't know if it can be considered a Tintin book because it is in fact a movie, so I think this is going to have to go in its own category, kind of like The Land of the Soviets. So yeah, this has been my thoughts and rankings of the Tintin books. I hope you have enjoyed, and have a lovely day.